The children of three suns, the Ghemin returned in silence, skimming the edge of human skies like a forgotten promise, and when they finally left, the only proof of their visit was the sudden, impossible greening of a distant red world. The children of three suns, they had once walked under three suns. On Earth, they strode through steaming equatorial forests where the air hung heavy and wet, their skin so black it swallowed the light until, at a certain angle, it shimmered with a deep liquid blue, like night broken over still water. On Mars, they watched dawn spill thin and copper over plains of ice and rust. And on Ghemin, the lost world that now sleeps as the asteroid belt, they built cities that blossomed from black stone and living metal, singing resonance into mountains until the peaks themselves bent like petals toward the stars. The Ghemin were tall, the shortest standing 8 feet high, the tallest nearer 9, all lean as pillars and crowned with hair twisted like starlit branches or coiled tight against helms of carved alloy. Their garments were not woven, they grew them, coaxing shimmering plates from seed metal that clung to their bodies in ornate lattices, patterns shifting slowly, telling stories in flowing geometry only they could read. In those days, their civilization was a triad across the inner system, Ghemin, Mars, and Earth orbiting in a fragile accord of gravity and memory. They kept the oceans of Mars from freezing solid, anchored the crust of Earth against catastrophic tilts, and tuned Ghemin's magnetic field so its sky glowed with curtains of blue fire every night. Then the intruder came. A bone-white asteroid, a shard from some distant collision in the dark beyond Jupiter, fell inward on a path no Ghemin calculation had foreseen. It struck Ghemin with a sun's ferocity. The planet's stone cracked like glass. Continents folded inward. The sky became a scream of molten dust. In a single day, Ghemin died. The debris spread, a ring of jagged tombstones between Mars and Jupiter. The asteroid belt humanity would one day puzzle over, wondering if it was the wreckage of a world or something less dramatic. The Ghemin did not wonder. They knew every fragment by name. The impact did more than shatter their home. Gravity itself flinched. Mars's orbit stretched and trembled. Its fragile atmosphere bled away into space. Earth's tilt shifted by a whisper, but enough to twist climate, stir storms, and break the delicate equilibrium the Ghemin had sustained for millennia. They tried to hold on. They stayed through quakes and red storms. They seeded stabilizing towers beneath oceans and anchored magnetic fields with colossal orbiting spires. But Ghemin was gone. Mars was unraveling, and Earth had begun to forget them. The younger human civilizations that watched them from the ground could only invent myths, giants swallowed by the sky, shadow gods who vanished into the stars. And so, in the end, the Ghemin left. They gathered their remaining millions inside ships grown from resonant alloy and dark light, vessels that were more thought than machine. A fleet braided itself from orbiting seeds above Mars and Earth, then folded into a corridor of bent space and disappeared into the deep black, carrying their grief, their sciences, and the last intact memories of a three-world age. The silent return, 125,000 years later. As humanity counted itself clever and new, a shadow appeared at the edge of the moon's orbit. It was round and impossibly smooth, a gleaming sphere 1/3 the size of the moon itself. It arrived without a radio announcement, without a burn of conventional engines, simply bleeding into visibility where the heavens had moments before been empty. Telescopes turned, signals probed, radar pings scattered off its polished hull, but the ship did not answer. Astronomers argued and governments panicked, social feeds filled with trembling phone footage of a new dark curve rising beside the moon, like a second blackened twin. Religious leaders declared omens, military agencies spun helpless scenarios. Inside the ship, 10 million Ghemin moved through corridors that curved like the inside of a pearl. Their skin still drank the light, and when they passed beneath luminous conduits, their bodies glowed with that same blue shimmer humanity had once mistaken for magic. They watched Earth in silence, its clouds thick and white, its cities lighting up the night side in spider webs of gold. "Much has grown," murmured Sile, one of the elder cartographers, her towering headdress unfolding like silver petals as she examined the projection of the planet beneath them. "Much has forgotten," answered Voru, archivist of Ghemin's lost days. His voice carried the weight of ages, and his eyes reflected the swirling oceans. "They do not know us. We did not come to be known," said their navigator, Liru, a figure whose armor was inscribed with star maps so dense they looked like flowing script. "We came for the seeds." The Ghemin had not returned as conquerors or saviors. They had come as gardeners. Over several months, the ship drifted in an intricate spiral around Earth. dipping shallow into the planet's magnetic fields like a stone skimming the surface of a river. From orbit, they released invisible filaments of matter, harmless to humans, intangible to sensors, that descended into forests, oceans, grasslands, and deserts. Where a filament brushed a leaf, it collected a complete pattern of that plant's genome, its chemical language, its evolutionary history tucked into layers of quantum memory. Where it touched an animal, a microcurrent whispered through blood and bone, recording cellular architectures, behavioral echoes, even the electromagnetic signatures of thought. Insects were read in swarms, coral reefs sang entire libraries into Ghemin receivers. People never knew. They walked their cities, stared at the shimmering sphere, and argued about invasion and disclosure in treaties. But the Ghemin never spoke. No lights blinked in greeting. No symbols flashed in human wavelengths. The ship remained a mirror that showed nothing back. Yet sometimes late at night, a child or an insomniac office worker would look up and swear the dark vessel flickered faintly with a blue halo, as if something inside had turned to face them for just a heartbeat before looking away. Within the ship, the Ghemin studied what they had gathered. They carried life far, said Sile, tracing a procession of DNA strands that spiraled in holographic 3D around her. Domesticated grasses, altered fruits, animals in shapes we did not design. They did well, Voru admitted. They survived without us, Liru added, neither pleased nor displeased, only observant. That matters, it means they may survive what comes. What comes, Abael asked. Liru gestured outward through the projection of Earth toward Mars, a dim red coin in the dark. Debt, she said. We lost Ghemin. We could not keep Mars. The balance we once held was broken. This system is unfinished. We are here to correct that for ourselves and for them. And terraformers of the Red Memory, after 3 months, the Ghemin ship shifted course. Without thrust, without visible reaction, it slid away from Earth's orbit, its dark hull kissing the edge of the moon's shadow before angling outward. In telescopes, it appeared to elongate, then compress, a trick of space bending, before its image smeared into a blur and vanished. On Earth, news cycles screamed. Had the visitors fled? Had they deemed humanity unworthy, dangerous, irrelevant? Conspiracy videos sprouted in hours. Some believed a secret deal had been made. Others insisted nothing had ever been there at all. 8 weeks later, quiet graduate researchers in underfunded observatories noticed something odd about Mars. Its thin atmosphere, long measured as a whisper of mostly carbon dioxide, had changed. Spectral lines showed new gases in strange ratios. The planet's temperature, always bitterly cold, had risen by a few degrees in what should have been an impossible time span. Dust storms had shifted, becoming less chaotic, more patterned, like currents moving to a rhythm. They published hesitant papers. Their supervisors shrugged. Data sampling error, someone suggested. Instrument miscalibration, said another. But as more telescopes turned, the anomaly sharpened into certainty. Mars was changing. Then one clear night, the same sphere that had once haunted the sky above Earth appeared beside Mars, eclipsing a sliver of its rust-red disk. Photographs emerged first from amateurs, then from professionals, a dark gleaming curve, 1/3 the lunar diameter, resting in orbit like a black crown above the planet. This time, astronomers knew where to look. They watched in every wavelength they could manage: radio, infrared, ultraviolet, X-ray. They saw plumes of tightly controlled energy vent from the sphere in narrow beams, striking Mars's surface in silent, invisible impacts. Where those beams touched, ice sublimated into vapor, lingering not as ghosts but as deliberate clouds that wrapped themselves around the planet's waist. High above the surface, the Ghemin worked. Atmosphere first, Liru instructed, her voice echoing across chambers of living alloy. We must thicken the veil, warm the dust, invite liquid to flow again. They grew engines from the ship's interior, mechanisms like colossal seeds of obsidian crystal, which unfolded into arrays of resonant rods. These rods tuned themselves to Mars's magnetic field, stirring it, amplifying it, coaxing dormant currents into new strength. At the same time, they released microparticulates into the upper air, manufactured from Martian regolith, tiny rods that trapped heat, mimicking, in a controlled manner, the greenhouse effects that had once spiraled dangerously on Earth. From orbit, they redirected frozen carbon dioxide, melting polar caps into vapor that joined the thickening sky. They seeded the high atmosphere with engineered nuclei on which water could condense, shaping storm tracks, guiding nascent rivers where they wanted them to flow sometime in the far future. And the ground? Sael asked, overseeing maps of canyons and basins whose names humanity had given, but the Ghemin remembered in older tongues. We give it memory, Voru answered. He initiated fragment releases, packets of encoded genetic data derived from Earth's plants, animals, and microbial life. They did not simply copy, they translated altering sequences for lower gravity, different spectra of sunlight, new soil chemistries. In hidden vaults beneath the sphere's hull, reservoirs of seed mist shimmered, waiting. We will not overwrite, Voru continued. We will blend. Mars will be itself, not Earth in disguise. Liru nodded. Mars was once our second home. It will be our third now, and perhaps theirs someday if they are wise. From Earth, telescopes began to capture faint hints of clouds curling over the Martian equator, thicker than any seen before. Spectrometers reported the presence of water vapor, traces of nitrogen, and complex atmospheric dynamics that models struggled to replicate. Some images, heavily processed, suggested darkening at certain latitudes, maybe dust, maybe rock, or as one excited intern insisted, the first hints of lichen-like growth. Her supervisor told her not to jump to conclusions, but when he looked alone at the data, he found he wanted to believe her. Echoes across the belt. At the edge of the asteroid belt, the Ghemin ship extended a single needle-like spire from its hull. It reached impossibly long toward a particular cluster of rocks, fragments that once had been Ghemin's mountains, its ocean's floors, its city's foundations. The spire emitted a wave, a low thrumming vibration that rippled through stone. In that wave was a song. It was not music human ears could hear, but it was remembrance, patterns encoded in resonance, calling back old alignments, old orbits, old harmonies. The asteroids shifted by imperceptible amounts, adjusting their paths the way a flock of birds might tilt mid-flight. Over millions of years, those tiny changes would stabilize the inner system more firmly, redistributing mass in a way that balanced Mars's new atmosphere against future perturbations. We owe the dead, Liru said quietly. Sael bowed her head. We cannot rebuild Ghemin. No, Voru agreed, but we can carry its story forward. Mars will be the living monument. Its air will remember Ghemin's breezes. Its rivers will curve as Ghemin's did. In one private chamber beneath an intricate dome engraved with star fields, a council of elders considered a question whether to speak to Earth. They will see what we do, Sael said. They will know it is not natural. They will fear or they will worship. Either way, they will make stories. Stories are inevitable, Voru replied. We cannot stop that, but we can decide whether to give them truth or leave them to myth. Liru traced a line of light across the projection of Earth, a sliver of blue and white hanging at the edge of the holographic field. When we were there last, she said, they were not ready to understand us even in the simplest terms. They saw shadows and called us gods or giants. Now they have machines that can parse atmospheres and gravity wells. Oh, but they still tear each other apart over borders they drew like scars on maps. Their planet is fragile. Their societies are young. If we speak, we will change them too quickly. So we remain silent, Voru concluded. For now, Liru said, we will let them watch. We will let Mars grow. One day, perhaps their ships will taste this new air. When that happens, they will find our mark everywhere. The plants that echo terrestrial genomes, the insects that hum in slightly altered frequencies, the towering trees whose bark shimmer black-blue in the weak Martian sun. Sail's eyes sparked. We plant Ghemin in their future. Yeah, said Liru. Not as rulers, as ancestors they never met. The first Martian night years pass. On Earth, wars flickered in and out, economies rose and fell, and documentaries narrated the mystery terraformers in solemn, dramatized tones, speculating about motives with more confidence than evidence. Children grew up with posters of a cloudy Mars on their walls, a symbol of possibility and unease. In orbit around Mars, the Ghemin ship continued its work, patient and precise. Inside a sheltered valley, shielded from harsh winds by cliffs shaped millions of years ago, the first Ghemin-grown tree unfurled. It rose slowly from a seed pod deployed by a descending drone, a dark trunk swelling from the red dust like spilled ink spreading across parchment. The tree's bark was so black it devoured the weak sunlight. Only when the thin rays struck it at an angle did it bloom with a sheen of blue. Like glacial water glimpsed at midnight, branches arced high, forming a lattice that caught scarce moisture and funneled it downwards. Its roots whispered to engineered microbes, inviting them to weave nutrients from rock. Around it, smaller plants sprouted, ferns with metallic veins, mosses with nanoscales that trapped heat. A Ghemin figure descended to stand beside it. She was nearly 9 feet tall, her armor a maze of interlocking plates that reflected the faint sky in muted silver. Her skin caught the thin sunlight and, as she lifted her face toward it, glowed faintly blue. "This feels like home," she said, voice low and reverent. Voru stood beside her, hands clasped behind his back, eyes tracing the horizon where a faint, growing haze hinted at a thicker, distant atmosphere. "It will be," he replied. "And Earth?" she asked. "Earth will watch," Voru said, "and we will watch them. One day, perhaps, they will realize we never came to take, only to give, to mend what we broke when Ghemin fell." She looked up at the pale disk of Earth, barely visible as a star. "Do you think they will understand?" Voru considered the question, then smiled slightly. "Understanding is not a requirement for benefit," he said. "We did not understand our ancestors, yet we inherited their work. The humans will inherit ours. That is enough." The sky that remembers on a crisp autumn night in a small town on Earth. Far from observatories and public lectures, a young boy stood in his backyard and peered through a cheap telescope at Mars. He had watched it for weeks as part of a school project, tracking its position against the stars. Tonight he saw something he'd never seen before, a faint ghostly veil around the planet, like breath in cold air. He didn't know it was the edge of a newborn atmosphere, thickening year by year. He didn't know that high above that thin sky, a ship the size of continents drifted, its corridors filled with tall beings whose skin glowed blue at the right angle, who had once walked Earth's forest before humanity learned to write. All he knew was that Mars didn't look dead anymore. "It's yay," he whispered, though he wasn't sure why he chose that word. He lowered the telescope, looked up with just his eyes, and imagined a world that could someday hold him, breathe with him, shelter him under black-blue trees and strange stars. Millions of miles away, on that changing world, a Ghemin child stood beneath the first canopy of those trees and gazed up at a sky slowly turning softer and more blue. Two children, two worlds, each staring across a widening bridge of air and time, neither aware of the other, but both present in the same unfolding story. The story of a shattered planet remembered in a ring of stone, of a race who left and returned, of a silent ship that collected the Earth's living library before moving on to write a new chapter in Martian soil. And above them all, between Mars and Jupiter, Ghemin's remains circled in endless night, listening as gravity settled into a gentler song, one that promised that, though worlds could die,